Hi everyone. So we've come to the end really of our life cycles topic and unit of work in science. That means that hopefully when we're all back at school next week, or most of us, we will be able to do our 2-page spread on Monday afternoon. So we're just going to recap on life cycles today, and then you've just got a little crossword to do. So make sure you're watching and listening carefully, because the answers will be in here for your crossword somewhere. So let's have a little look. We're going to look at first the life cycle of a mammal. We did this piece of work before, so we have the gestation period, which is where the embryo grows inside the mother, and it's completely reliant upon the mother to survive and to grow inside. And remember, mammals have different gestational periods of time. Obviously, we know that humans are pregnant for around 9 months, but then this varies from mammal to mammal. So each mammal goes through a gestation period. After the embryo has grown inside the mother, it is then born, and we come into the period of time of the young. So this is the main period of growth and developing independence from the parents. And then finally, adults. The independent adult usually seeks company from the opposite sex and then mates. Adult female nurses their young. And remember about mammals, they have hair or fur, they're warm-blooded, they feed their babies milk, and they give birth to live babies. They're alive, obviously, when they give birth. So there's just a basic life cycle of a mammal, from the embryo growing inside the mother, into the young, and then finally into the adult. The amphibian then, we did this when we had a look at the life cycle of a frog, and we're going to look at the life cycle of a frog again, and it involves 5 main stages. So the first stage is the female, and the female this time lays a mass of eggs which are fertilized by the male. Okay, so they're outside of the frog, not inside as in a mammal. So the female lays eggs, and then they're fertilized by the male. After 2 to 25 days, the tadpole hatches from the egg. It swims and eats plants, and it breathes through its gills. From the tadpole, it then grows front legs and its tail shortens. It uses nutrients in its tail as food, and it jumps out of the water and onto the land. After it's grown its front legs and the tail shortens, it then grows fins and a stronger tail. It develops lungs and back legs. And then finally, the tail disappears and it starts to eat insects instead of plants. And it takes 2 to 4 years to become an adult frog, when it can then lay eggs. So, things to note about amphibians: they live in water and on land. They have moist, slimy skin most of the time. They lay eggs, and their babies are different from the adults that they become. So you can see there, that's the incomplete metamorphosis, remember? So we go from the tadpole to the frog. So there's the life cycle of the amphibian, from the eggs to the little tadpole that then grows its front legs, hind legs and little tail shortens into the adult frog. Reptiles then, similar to amphibians in a way, because the female and male mate, and then the female reptiles lay the fertilized eggs. So they do mate, and the female lays the eggs. They're already fertilized when she's laid them. And then an embryo starts to grow within the egg. Most reptiles bury their eggs and leave them to hatch alone. When the embryo is fully formed inside the egg, it is called a hatchling, and it uses an egg tooth to break out of the egg, or hatch. Okay, there you can see that happening there. And there's an interesting fact here, that although most reptiles lay eggs, a few species do actually give birth to living offspring. But the majority of reptiles lay eggs. So when you have the hatchling that's broken out of the egg, it begins to grow and becomes a juvenile, a young. The juvenile looks just like the adult reptile, and the juvenile grows slowly over a long period before reaching adulthood. And then finally, when we're in adulthood, the adult reptile will begin to mate. There's another interesting fact here. Due to the mother burying her eggs and leaving them to hatch, the hatchlings have to fend for themselves from the moment they leave their egg. So that's a bit different perhaps to some mammals. So these are reptiles, remember, and reptiles, most of them hatch from eggs. They're cold-blooded, not warm-blooded like mammals, and they have dry, scaly skin. And to understand the life cycle of a reptile then, although they are all classed as reptiles, the life cycles of some of these creatures can be very different from what we have learnt so far. So we've got the garter snake and the crocodile. So perhaps you can figure out why their life cycles are slightly different to each other. Maybe that's something you can research in your own time. Insects then. And remember, we had a look at the butterfly when we did this in class, and we talked about metamorphosis in the terms of it being a complete metamorphosis. So most insects undergo complete metamorphosis, and this involves 4 main stages. So we're not just talking about a butterfly life cycle here. This is the life cycle of an insect in general. So we have eggs that are laid by the female insect, a bit like amphibians, but there's obviously things that happen differently. Eggs are laid by the female insect. The eggs hatch into larvae. The larvae look nothing like the adult. There you can see a larva there. This varies depending on species. Common forms are caterpillars, maggots, and grubs. So caterpillars, maggots, and grubs are all larvae. They're at the larva stage of something new, growing and developing. Then we have the pupa, and the pupa is formed when the larva molts for the last time. Pupa have a hard protective coating and are often camouflaged. The larva transforms completely inside the pupa. So when we think about the butterfly changing from the caterpillar, which is the larva, into the butterfly, the larva, the caterpillar, goes inside what we call a chrysalis. So the chrysalis is actually the pupa. Okay, now it's not called a chrysalis for every insect. So generally it's classed as a pupa. That's where the larva goes and encases itself, keeps itself protected, and in there it completely transforms. So that's the pupa. Then finally the adult breaks out of the pupa and matures. So things to note about insects then. Yes, they hatch from eggs. Some look like parents and shed skin as they grow, but some go through complete metamorphosis young, and adult are different. And we have insects that go through an incomplete metamorphosis, and they have 3 main stages compared to the 4. We have eggs that are laid by the female insect. The eggs hatch into nymphs. So not larvae this time that completely change, but the eggs that this insect lays hatch into nymphs, and their appearance varies depending on the species. Nymphs look like a smaller adult insect and usually share the same habitat and food as the adult. So rather than it being a larva, which is completely different to the adult insect, in some insects they are nymphs. The nymph then grows into the adult form, sometimes shedding skin. And in winged insects, their fully functional wings mark the adult stage, and then the adult females lay the eggs and the whole thing starts again. Okay, so no larva and no pupa, because don't forget, the larva in a complete metamorphosis is completely different to the adult. The larva goes into a pupa where it completely transforms into something different. Okay, whereas with these insects, mainly flying insects by the looks of it, the eggs turn into nymphs that are a smaller version really of the adult. Okay, there you can see the pictures. Complete metamorphosis. You can clearly see that ladybird is completely different to the larva. And the incomplete metamorphosis, where the young, the nymph, is similar to that of the adult. And then we have birds then. So birds, the life cycle of birds, we did look at the chicken life cycle. 3 main stages. Eggs are laid by the mother, and the mother and the father care for the egg until it hatches. The mother and the father feed the young bird until it is old enough to fly and find its own food, and the independent adult usually seeks company from the opposite sex and mates, and the cycle starts again. So lay eggs. The eggs are fertilised. Remember, we had a little look at that when we did about this in class. The eggs are already fertilised, and then they keep them warm. They look after their eggs until they hatch, and then their young depend on them to feed them before they become an adult. And remember, things to note about birds: they have feathers and wings, they're warm-blooded, they lay eggs. So if we look at just the life cycles of mammals and birds, we can see some similarities and some differences. So similarities between the both: there are 3 main stages to both. The first stage is where the embryo forms and grows. The second stage is where the young is helped and supported by its parents, whether through giving milk if they're a mammal, or finding food for them if they're a bird. And then the third stage is the adult stage, where the reproduction takes place and the cycle starts again. The differences, though, are that mammals give birth to live young, whereas birds lay eggs. The mammal is usually nursed by the mother. Nursed in that sense means given milk, whereas the young birds are usually fed by the adult male and female, not just the female. We had a little bit of a look at this the other week in Science Online. So we have a flowering plant. Plants are obviously living things. They have a life cycle. So we have germination. Remember that word? The seed starts to grow when the conditions are suitable, and the roots start to grow, usually underground. A stem and leaves form, and the plant makes its own food through a process called photosynthesis. The pollen in the flowers is used to make seeds, and then the seeds are spread out so that they can grow where they're not fighting for space with the parent plant. So this is about the life cycle of a bean. Okay, the roots grow underground, the stem and the leaves form, the pollen is used in the flowers to make new seeds. The seeds then are spread out and dispersed where they can grow where they're not fighting for space. So flowering plants have flowers, and the flowers produce seeds, and the seeds are in fruit as well. Then we have a non-flowering plant, for example a fern, and that involves 5 main stages. Germination, where the seed starts to grow when conditions are suitable. The roots grow, usually underground, so that's the same as the flowering plant. A stem and leaves form, and the plant makes its own food, photosynthesis, that's the same. The seeds are produced, but without flowers, so there's no pollen this time. There's no pollen in the flowers this time, because there are no flowers on the plant, there's just seeds. The seeds are spread out so they can grow where they're not fighting for space with the parent plant. So the main difference here between the flowering plant and the non-flowering plant is that obviously seeds are produced on the non-flowering plant without the need for a flower. So they have no flowers, and the seeds and spores are produced by pollen being spread, e.g. by the wind. Okay, so just a little recap there. There are some key words on this video, and on that PowerPoint there were some key words that you will need for your crossword. So have a good go at it, read it carefully, think about learning that you've just recapped on or learning that you remember from before, and have a good go. Goodbye.